Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Paranormal Karen, funny too. Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Oh, and did I mention she's funny too? Yeah, cha-cha-cha.
Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast, Paranormal Karen. As you know from the song, today we're talking about my favorite topic, which is the Mothman. And if there's any chance I can read my own writing, you guys are going to know more about the Mothman than you ever did before. You're going to be fascinated. You're going to be like, I know that why that's her favorite. Real quick, I'm going to do my housework up front because I always forget to do it. And I just want to say thanks to Mike at Uno Rising Media. He is my podcast producer, my podcast advisor, my podcast friend, my friend, all those things. Also, Navarro, Florida, 45 minutes from Pensacola. I think I said that right. Fundraiser in 2 weeks, November 17th with Sonia King, animal communicator, stand-up comedy show in a theater that is bring your own beer. How about that? That couldn't be cheaper. You couldn't make more of a mess of yourself than that. That's terrific. Okay, and I have a short story for you. And first of all, thanks for everybody. I love your emails. I love your comments. And I always notice when you guys say your favorite podcasts, I'm always flattered because there's always at least one, which is one I've done alone. Because sometimes I feel like my guests are so good. There's a point in the middle sometimes where I go, you know what? They don't need me. People don't need me to listen. I could just let the guests talk. In fact, I believe the one coming up after me is Jessa Reed. Gonna blow your mind. Gonna blow your mind. I have a couple more. I have Carl from the Estes Paranormal Group. Just so many good podcasts coming up. So I am doing a study on cleansing houses since so many people are talking to me about stuff in their house. You know, I've done the shows of protection with Tommy, but I'm just taking in all this information and I found out about lemons. Okay. So lemons are used a lot of times in like, Santeria or, which is another thing I'm going to do a whole podcast on, or casting spells. You know, they're very powerful if you want something to go sour, bad, or if you want it to purify good. And what I have found is that if you leave lemons around your house and there is positive energy, they will simply turn brown and over time turn into gourds. The inside will dry out. You'll have a hard ball, like a hard. They're getting, the ones in my house are turning really hard, almost like a golf ball. And, that means there's positive energy around. When there is negative energy, they tend to get little black spots or turn moldy or not age the same way. So I put them all over my house. Most of them, all of them good, especially where I read tarot or do kind of things like that. In the bedroom, one of them kind of starts to go awry. And it's interesting because the bedroom in my apartment appears as though it was not part of the original apartment. When you have a house that has something added on or a different piece or something that came later or something that got knocked down, you can almost feel that in the energy of the house. The feng shui doesn't flow right or something like that. So my bedroom not only has a strange sort of different feel to it, it also seems to have, whenever people come over that see spirit and stuff, they're always like, there's kind of a train that goes through there. There's kind of a little bzzz of everybody sees something kind of go through the bedroom. Not something that is dangerous or is even aware of me. It seems like either a residual energy or something that seems to go zip right through the bedroom. Always people seeing it in the same sort of line of energy as it goes. So I know the bedroom's a little funky. So even before I put the lemons in, some of you may have heard the podcast with Robin Celine talking about crystals. And she told me about a gentleman that bought one of her Himalayan salt lamps and said he has never slept better. Well, that guy was right. I have a Himalayan salt lamp in my bedroom now, and I have never slept so deep. And I have no trouble sleeping. So if I'm noticing a difference, something is going on. And I know they clear the air. The heated salt somehow puts positive or negative ions on the air. I don't know, something like that. Whatever. One of the two. Whichever one is correct, that's the one it does. But it also must keep that minimal paranormal activity that's always there. Okay. unless you've even if you've built a house out in the wilderness, you could have elementals or something. But I think there's a minimal level of paranormal activity that's always wherever we are. It's all over the planet. This must either clear it out or keep it to a minimum. So I moved the Himalayan salt lamp from across the room to the place where the lemons were kind of not doing well. And turns out I couldn't sleep at all. So somehow it went into over-energize. So I keep the Himalayan salt lamp, other side of the room, sleep like the dead, used it to clear up this patch in the bedroom that seemed to be not doing well with the lemons. All good, all interesting. So now when I do research for these, which by the way, I do appreciate when you guys like these that I do alone. I'm going to try and do one a month or once every 2 months, but it's so much information. In fact, I thought this one on the Mothman was going to be easy. 20, 40 hours later of work, I'm sitting here with my little stack of papers. Okay. So, I'll try it. I like to do them a lot. I think it's an interesting break. It's a lot of research on one topic. So I went to an old bookstore, and this is what I've discovered. When I'm trying to get the information on the internet, a couple of things happen. First of all, if you're getting occult information, it seems it's all spread out. You kind of can't find one website, and it's always, even sometimes if you look at my podcast, nothing is terrifying. There's no, black-eyed creatures in the logo. It doesn't have to be terrifying. They start you out and you go, who is this? And why would this person have that horrible picture to pass on information or whatever? Sometimes it makes it better. I shouldn't criticize anyone else. But when you go to a bookstore, you're getting a book. And you're getting someone that's put that much time and effort into a book. And a lot of the books in this old bookstore I went to were published way before the self-publishing came so easy on the internet. And I forgot about this store. It's right up the street from me. It is amazing. It is like out of Tales from the Crypt or any movie where you can barely walk down the aisles, because there are so many shelves of books. And where there are not shelves of books, there are stacks of books. And where there are not stacks of books, there are boxes of books. It is not a place for a claustrophobic. It is everything. It's not a place to be in an earthquake. Holy cow. You'd die from books falling on you. And so I go to the occult section. Not only is there the greatest shelf of books, but when you pull off the books, you find there's another shelf of books behind the shelf of books. It's just books, books, books. So I'm going to lose my mind at how many interesting topics, voodoo, hoodoo, everything is there. And I find one, and it looks almost new, like no one has used it, but it's about blood rituals and necromancy. And I thought, well, this is a good one. I looked in it, and it's easy to read for a dyslexic. It has very short sort of chapters, bullet points, that kinds of things that I like. And I thought, well, there's an interesting one that I can kind of filter through and see if there's any information in there, any information to pass on or information I would need. You know, if people call me with curses and stuff like that, it's good to know how people do these things. So you might have a guess on how to unwind it or how to narrow down what someone told you is happening to them. So I get this book and I get it home and I put a lemon on it. And it's not 2 to 3 hours before that lemon starts to get little black spots on it. Now, I don't believe the book is cursed or anything with it. I think somebody used it for yucky things. So it's got a funk to it. So I don't have time to deal with it right then. So I put it in a red pillowcase. Some of you may remember Tommy, people with demonology stuff, they neutralize things with a red blanket. So I put it in a red pillowcase and I leave it in my garage because I'm like, you know what? I don't need any. I want to sleep. I don't want to be thinking about a book in my kitchen. So sure enough, an hour call, 3 hours later. Hey, your garage is open. Some people know when you live in an apartment building with lots of garage doors, sometimes your garage openers can get on the same frequency as someone else. So someone will close their garage when yours will open or vice versa. For the next day, that keeps happening. Hey, your garage is open. So I'm like, all right, I get it. I get it. I take the book out, I bring it in the house, I cover it in salt. All the problems go away. All the garage door openings go away. It's still in my kitchen right now, covered in salt, which is fine. Just a tip, when you guys hear me talk about salt, 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 there you go. So that will be a topic we will cover. But today we are covering my favorite paranormal cryptozoology story ever. And although it ends on sort of a sad note, I think you will understand why I find it so fascinating. So get your cup of coffee. Here's mine. I have no idea what I was doing when I did the one on the missing flight 360, but everybody called me and said, I haven't drank coffee in years, and whatever you were drinking sounded so good. I had to get a cup of coffee. So everyone get your coffee. We're in this now. So I don't know how many years ago, 10, 15 years ago, they put out a movie called The Mothman Prophecies with Richard Gere, which I believe did not get the proper reviews that it deserved, because it was a really great movie. Not that accurate, but after you hear this podcast today, you're going to understand why they probably couldn't do it that accurate. There was so much to this story. There was so much insanity with this story that to put it all together in 90 minutes or 2 hours or whatever it was insane. So they sort of mixed some characters together, and put it, but it really was a great movie. I highly recommend it if you can find it, The Mothman Prophecies. So it is the true story, based on a true story. This is the true story of what happened in Point Pleasant, West Virginia from 1966 to 1967. And I'm going to start with the area next to Point Pleasant, or around Point Pleasant, called the McClintock Wildlife Area. Okay. There is a little bit of a backstory, which I'm just going to scan for you. So you know the phrase, the cornstalk curse, or it was the curse of cornstalk. There was in 1774, the Shawnee and the Ming tribes banded together to defend their home against the invading Virginia militia. So this is all the way back 1774, where we're still building our colonies. And they had a couple of battles. They had a battle of Point Pleasant, which was the bloodiest. This is on this area. And there was the chief that was for the side of the American Indians, and his name was Cornstalk. Now, the Indians really got whooped in this. We won the battle. We pushed them back. 3 years later, they return. They have a treaty. We then get a treaty with the Indians, and everything is kind of peaceful. 3 years later, Cornstalk, who I have to say through everything was really, as much as all the history I've heard on this is kind of like we were the jerks. We just took their land. And I kind of like the way that was presented, because that's really what we did. I'm proud of my country, but back then we were just pushing people off land, and that was what we did. But they really kind of, in the stories I hear, I like that they give Chief Cornstalk his dignity. They talk, and his integrity. They talk about how he was a very honest man, very respected, in fact, respected by the people of the colonies at the same time. So they had a treaty 3 years later. Cornstalk came back for a visit with his two sons. For whatever reason, it was a peaceful visit. It was to talk about the treaty or the peace or whatever. And a couple of colonial guys got drunk and murdered him. Okay. That was the story. Now, like 100 years later, in Point Pleasant, in one of the city buildings, they find a closet or something that they didn't even know was in the building. And they open it up and they find a play that sixth graders put on back in the 1700s, something like that. And the play is about this battle. And the play ends with Cornstalk going, "You are all cursed. There is a curse on this land for 200 years or whatever." That never happened. But when they read this play, that myth traveled like wildfire, to the point where when anything goes wrong in Point Pleasant, people still go, "Oh, that's the curse of Cornstalk." Okay. So just know, if you're watching something with the Mothman in it, when you hear about the curse of Cornstalk, that's what they're talking about. part of that is in the McClintock Wildlife Area. They do not know how many people died there or how many perhaps American Indian bodies are buried there. So it sort of has a haunted feel to it overall. The play was in 1923. And here's another part I just want you to know before I actually start the story. For 50 years, there actually had been one or two sightings. Every once in a while, someone would have a sighting of a birdman that was flying. So what happened in 1966 was not totally new, but you'll hear the difference. Okay. There's a book documented about it called Haunted Valley, and more folk tales of the Apache. That's by a guy named James Gay Jones. He was a professor in Glenville College. He documented that in a book. So there's a lot of things about the Appalachia in that book. So the McClintock Wildlife Reserve, it was a bird sanctuary to the mid 1900s. Then it was called the TNT plant because in World War II, they needed that land. The government used that land as an area to make bombs. They built a power plant and they used that area to manufacture explosives or TNT. They had these bunkers all over this area where they stored the TNT and the acid for bombs. And they did this for 5 years and the city owned it all, but they rented it out to the government or whatever. These bunkers became full of unknown chemicals. So people didn't know what was in there. The war is over. They're not sure what to do with it. It's like radiation. We're still not what to do with it. So in 1944, after the war didn't need the explosives, the Army commissioned 3,000 acres to become the McClintock Wildlife Management Area. That's kind of where it stands today. The area was divided up and some of these bunkers were leased out to private companies to store their chemical supplies. So we got the TNT stuff, we got the war bombs, and now we got it rented out. So basically, nobody really knows what was in those and nobody knows how many chemicals or what chemicals leaked. Okay. And it became highly toxic. In the 1960s, they actually closed it down for a little while and they tried to find out what was going on because the water was so full of chemicals and everything like that. The EPA came in and removed the topsoil because they felt like the chemicals had seeped into there. What they found was there was an enormous amount of leaks and sort of no matter how much topsoil they removed, that's in there. That wildlife area was pretty saturated with chemicals. And there were tales of people kind of finding mutated fish and stuff like that. So on November 12th, so that's just saying that maybe animals were a little mutilated. There was kind of, just so you know how funky that area was. It has sort of the dead burial ground. It has the chemicals in it. It has a weird wildlife park. So there's a lot going on. They also had power plants that were abandoned, that were built there at one time. They were abandoned. Now, November 12th, 1966, 85 miles away from this place in Clinton, West Virginia, two men are digging a grave when they suddenly see what looks like a 6-foot man flying, just comes out and flies past them, almost like it looked like he came out of the ground, fly through the air. That is the first report. Salem, West Virginia, 90 miles away, Merrill Partridge hears a loud noise outside of his house at 11 p.m. while he's watching TV with his family. He hears a loud noise. The TV starts to wind up. And that is the last sound effect I'll be doing, but that is correct. It starts winding up till it makes a high-pitched sound and the TV explodes. His dog can't stop barking at the door. He opens the door, goes to see what's outside. The dog takes off. The dog is never seen again. Okay? All of a sudden outside of his house, all he sees are 2 or 3 red lights sort of spinning, just like little balls of light rotating. 2 to 3 days later, he is outside with his family at his pool, and all of a sudden the sky goes black. And he looks up, and there is a large UFO completely covering the sky. Now, a lot of UFO buffs know there are all kinds of all the ships, and I haven't heard many reports of these now, but especially through the 70s and 80s, people would see ships that were so big at night, and sometimes they'd be like, how come it's so dark at night? They'd look up at the stars. The sky would be completely covered by these enormous black ships. So that's what he saw. 2 days later, November 15th, 1966, 11 p.m., two couples are driving past the TNT area. Now, the TNT area turned into this place of local legend, and it used to be kind of like a place where couples would go, or people would go there probably to drink, or kids would go there, all kinds of things. They're driving by the TNT area. They see a man in the road with huge wings. This 6-foot man with huge wings, the face of a bird, and two huge red glowing eyes. Okay. How much have you had to drink when you see that, right? It kind of has, although no one ever really can focus in on the face because everybody's kind of seeing the red eyes, it sort of is like a man bird face with a human body. And they thought it was kind of angelic because what would happen is when the Mothman would spread his wings, he never flapped his wings. They always say he went up like a helicopter. He just like levitated up like kind of an angel, something going up like that. Well, they freaked out and started driving. They're driving 100 miles per hour, and this thing is chasing them. It is up on the side of the car. They can see it. They can't figure out what's going on. They're freaking out. Some of you may have seen the horror movie Jeepers Creepers. The character in that movie was loosely based on the Mothman. Okay. The Mothman didn't eat anybody and kind of isn't really a violent type thing. It almost seems more like a curious thing. So they take off 100 miles per hour. This thing is just driving alongside of them. They veer. They come off and they finally lose this guy and they go directly to the police. The police start to hear the story. They immediately separate the four of them and start to investigate and listen to what happened. The police said the fear was so real and that it was so real and it was like they could not be making this crazy story up. What is this about a guy with red eyes and wings? So the police decide to go back to the TNT area. Immediately when they get there, radio signals start going crazy. Everything, they can't hear each other. Everything that Meryl Partridge described about his TV, remember that awesome sound effect I did, starts happening to their radio. So everybody is like, what the hell is going on? And the following weeks, they get more and more of this same report. People are seeing this thing everywhere, and it starts to make its way into the newspaper. The newspaper nicknamed him the Mothman because Batman had just come out at that time, and there were hundreds of reports, all the same, opened the wings and ascended to heaven, always with the red eyes. So the TNT plant became mostly where all these sightings were being seen, but they would report seeing this thing on the rooftop of another house, of their neighbor's house, maybe in town. This went on for months. Soon, hundreds of people were turning out of the TNT area. And one of the best quotes I saw in a movie was the guy said, all people wanted to know was, can I shoot it? And if there are two, can I shoot two? That's kind of a hunting community. Everybody's like, do I need a Mothman hunting license? Which, by the way, they do sell now at the Mothman Museum, which I owned one. I gave it to Ryan Singer as a gift, but you can get your Mothman hunting license. I think it's hysterical. Hundreds of people, hundreds of guns, not one camera. No one thought to bring a camera. Everyone bought a gun. Okay. Most of the witnesses were local. And keep in mind, this is in 1966. This is not 2018 where it's, we talk about this all the time. It's out in the open. This was 1966 and people were very religious in this small town. Some of them felt like it was an angel. Some felt like it was a devil, but basically it's not now. It's not, we're a little more open now. We wear our crazy on our sleeve. We did not at that time. So they interviewed a college professor that he thought it was just a bird of prey. That's what he thought it was. He said it was either a sandhill crane or it was maybe a snowy owl, because an owl would have the same wingspan as that. But these people live there. These people hunt there. These people have grown up there. They know what a sandhill crane looks like, and they know what an owl looks like. This was kind of insulting. And then you say, well, was it a mutation from all the chemicals that one of these kind of went off the rails? It would have to double in size, first of all, and that does not explain the red eyes. This is not the Incredible Hulk story. This is not something like that. Okay, so the other part was the effect on the people that were contacted by this or ran into this thing. The trauma to the witnesses went on they were terrified for years. They always were scared this thing was coming back. Many didn't want to talk about it. Many would have their eyes would swell, or there would be radiation burns, or they would have a horrifying case of conjunctivitis. They'd have pink eye, but mostly it was radiation burns on the face. Most teachers know about pink eye because they have little kids in school. That's how I got it once. And my sister was like, stop complaining. I teach kindergarten. I've had it like 5 times. Just get your eye drops. All right, everyone, coffee. Delicious coffee. I wish I could make you a whole cup of coffee like I do. One woman saw the red lights over the TNT area and stopped at she saw the red eyes, and then she just kept going. She was on her way to her friend's house. She got to her friend's house and got out of the car and thought she saw like a man sleeping over to the side. Well, the man got up, and it was the Mothman, and it freaked her out so bad that she actually fell down, and she fell on top of her baby daughter. This is how terrifying it was. She was so afraid. She could hear her daughter crying underneath her. She was paralyzed with fear. Finally, her brother came out and picked her up, and she said she saw feet and feathers, and they all got in the house. They grabbed the baby. They were all terrified. So here's the thing. The Mothman doesn't fly away. It walks around the porch looking in the window. Okay? So this story is not like a blurry picture of Bigfoot, or I might have seen, I'm not sure, I can't identify. This thing is now walking around the porch looking in the window. Sighting after sighting, red eyes glowing, going straight up, chasing cars. Descriptions are exactly the same. 5 pilots flying, see the massive bird flying at 70 miles per hour without it moving its wings. Some pilots saw it for 30 to 40 minutes. These things went on. Again, why does no one have a camera? So that was like, I think that point is so important that this is not a flash in the pan. This is not something that just keeps happening. This is happening for 30 to 40 minutes. This thing is walking around. This thing is very, very available. Okay, the thing about the Mothman is he has been seen throughout time. There are drawings in caves in history. I stopped and restarted, and I did this 3 times, and I don't know why this particular line is so hard to say. There's drawing in caves throughout history, especially in Turkey. There, I said it. Good Lord. Drawings in caves throughout history, especially in Turkey. There is the legend of the Banshee, which is described very much like the Mothman. It goes screaming across the sky. The Native Americans have something called the Thunderbird. It was considered an intermediary. Oh, I need more coffee. Between the earthbound and the spirit world. In fact, my neighbor came home. She loves to go to flea markets and stuff and get little pieces of art. She came home with a Thunderbird drawing, and I was like, did you know that's a Thunderbird? And she was like, no, I just know I needed that color in my apartment. Native Americans claimed the Thunderbird could pick up a whole buffalo. That's how big and strong they were. In 1856 in France, men were digging a mine, and they came they blew up a mine, and out of it popped a pterosaur, which is not really a lot like the Mothman, but it's a giant bird. And New Jersey always has its legend of the Jersey Devil. That's sort of sounds like a mini Mothman. Mini Mothman. There is also there's another monster that seems a lot like it. I'll remember that one. I actually want to do a whole episode on that one. Again, mini Mothman, big red eyes. So, is that weird enough for you? All that right there about the Mothman? Well, I'm not done. There's more. Okay. This just gets stranger. Again, the same time between 1966 and 1967, not just the Mothman, UFOs became so common, people would see 1 to 2 a night. Okay. 10 to 20 people per evening would start making these claims about UFOs, seeing UFOs. The UFO activity was so off the charts. Pilots would talk about them. Thousands of people saw the lights. They saw the crafts. One guy got out of his car because it was there was an actual UFO blocking the road. He stayed a minute, and without a sound, it flew away. You can hear my dog snoring in the back. I don't know what it is this morning, but he's snoring, and I was like, I better mention that. So, well, if you listen to Kira, he's always in the background making strange noises. The metallic crafts were everywhere. Most of them, again, seen at the power plant at the TNT area, but the activity was everywhere. Cars would stall and just stop as the UFOs were around. A man was walking his dog by the Ohio River, and he saw the same little red lights that Merrill Partridge saw, and he saw these little men moving in and out of it. They were running in and out. He couldn't tell what they were doing. For some reason, he had the feeling he called it like a blue collar task. Like these were the little guys doing the dirty work, which is true because you never really see anyone sweeping up the UFO. You never see anyone cleaning it up. So these are probably the janitors or stuff like that. He ran to get other people to see. They came back. They were still there. Okay. He ran and got other people. Other people came back. This is how accessible these things were. They also would show up at night. They would display different colors, just like, if you ever see the Phoenix lights, it sounded exactly like it. Like nobody's hiding anything here. Mary Heyer was a woman who was a correspondent for the Athens Messenger, and she was doing all the reports for the UFO and Mothman. The reason that she was chosen, it's very interesting because I'm always like, 1966, a woman was in charge. Did they give her the crappy job? But it wasn't. Actually, she was one of the most respected reporters. And people loved her. And another reason she had this job was because as she was reporting about the Mothman and UFOs, people did not feel intimidated to come and talk to her. So she started writing articles in the newspaper about the UFO activity. People started to call her and say, doors that were locked would suddenly unlock. They'd get up in the middle of the night and find their front door open. They would hear bangs and voices all around the house. They were almost like there was floating voices. You just hear someone talking above you. They told her, that these people would show up. So now they told her people would show up dressed strangely and would follow them around. They would come to their houses to interview them. Also, one teenage boy came in with his mom and said he was abducted and was forced to have sex with the aliens. There's only one report of that, but I have to say in that time, people must have been very, very embarrassed. So I'm sure it happened more. There was all kinds of strange technological noises. What's wrong with me? There were all kinds of strange technological noises that no one could identify that were heard, just out of nowhere. Static electricity on radios. Phones would have strange noises. They would hear electronic voices in their head. Mary Dyer also had phone trouble. Not only did she hear the voices, but she would get phone calls from people talking about events that hadn't happened yet. UFOs and Mothman sightings were so connected. Everyone was reporting this. Pilots, police officers. It just was crazy. Is that enough for you? I'm not done. There's more. The men in black came along. They would come in 3-piece suits. And they would come after the sightings, just like you hear. They would come to houses and they told the people to say nothing about the Mothman, nothing about the UFOs. And then they would just disappear as though you were speaking to them. And then you turned around and they were gone. They even came to visit Mary Heyer, the woman writing the newspaper articles. She reported in January of 1967 that one walked right up to her desk. This is what she said. He was short in stature, with unusual eyes set behind a pair of thick glasses, long jet black hair cut squarely on his head. He spoke in a peculiar manner as he asked for directions to Welsh, West Virginia. He continued to creep dangerously close, asking questions about the UFO reports. What rights did she have to print these things in the paper? It got a little intimidating, so she called to her coworker, who came in and also saw the man. As the man stood there, he grabbed a pen from her desk, looked at it as if it was weird, and then ran out of the office with it, laughing hysterically. Okay. Let me read that again. That's about the creepiest thing I've ever heard. The little guy, dressed kind of weird. And keep in mind, whenever there are humanoids, that's what I call them. People report humanoids. They are trying to mimic us, and they never really do a good job. There's always something a little bit off. I remember hearing a demonologist say, when demons materialize, they never get the teeth right. There. Thank you. You're welcome. There's your nightmares for a week. But just something like that, coming in, taking a pen off at your desk, looking at it, crazy, and then running out laughing. Holy cow. They continued showing up everywhere and threatening and being rude. They would show up. Here's the trick. They would show up in cars from the 20s or from a long time ago, one like the very first Model T cars, but they would be new. So they would be in new old cars. Mostly they were seen around the abandoned North Plant in the TNT area. And one night, a man named Bob Bobsworth, which has to be his real name because no one would make up a name that Bob Bobsworth. That sounds like a character on Family Guy. He was driving by on a motorcycle when he looked at the top of a 3-story building, and all he and his buddy could see were the 2 glowing red eyes. So they went up, and the moon was so bright, shining through the holes in the abandoned building, they could see good enough. It was so bright, they didn't need to, it wasn't pitch blackness. And slowly they saw the form of this creature very precisely walking over to them. Again, with the sound effects. I don't know what's wrong with me. They did not see the red eyes. This guy thought it was because there was no reflection where it was standing from the moon, but I find that last detail curious. He also said I may have been so in shock that I didn't notice them. I feel like it's more like that. The thing walked right up to them. They said it looked like it had no neck, but a large head that was just kind of plopped on top of the shoulders. The thing walked right up to them and then took a look, turned around, went to the catwalk, and flew away. Again, this is the only report where someone heard the wings flapping. Everybody else said it just, boom, it just went up. So now jump to November, Parkersburg. Okay. This is miles north of West Point Pleasant. Woodrow Dernberg, again, another great name, Bob Bobsworth and Woodrow Dernberg. I don't know who was naming people in this decade, but they had a great imagination. Woodrow Dernberg started to have contact. He started hearing voices, and he was then one night driving on Route 77 when he came in contact with a UFO. Okay, I want you to keep in mind this one right here, this particular thing that I'm talking about was 14 days before the first Mothman sighting. Okay, so we're a little ahead of it. A metallic UFO blocked the road and stalled his car. Out of the UFO exited a man who walked right up to the window. He looked like a human. He had on a long dark trench coat, and he spoke to Woodrow with telepathy. He did not move his mouth. In fact, he kept it in a fixed smile. All right. But he spoke to him telepathically, and he asked him to roll down the window. He did. And he understood everything this guy was telling him. They had a 10-minute conversation. The guy, Indrid Cold, that's the intro of the name. He said, I sleep, bleed, and eat as you do. He said he would return. And he continued to visit this guy for a long time. He said he visited many times. They took him in the spaceship once, and he disappeared. His family couldn't find him for 6 months. He was in the spaceship. Others reported this guy, Indrid Cold, trying to speak to them, but they never got to have conversations with him like Woodrow would. The Air Force was contacted about this. So many other people saw the aircraft. So this guy's story was confirmed by other people. He went on live TV and was even talked to by the police because he was a very believable witness, always talking about this encounter. He continued to get messages, and they would give him piercing headaches. I know this is sort of what we talk about in Spirit Emergency, where people our little bodies are not quite ready for this vibration. He would get awful headaches. His family would get phone calls and anonymous threats, and sometimes they were just nothing, just noises. They also spoke with Indrid Cole. Sometimes there would just be beeping or silences. His wife and children all came in contact with this. They were so freaked out about this. They also started getting warnings from men in black. After this went on for a while, Woodrow felt like he was losing his mind. He went to a psychiatrist who, after visits, said to him, there's nothing wrong with you. This sounds like it's really happening. And after that, the doctor was visited by Indrid Cold. He came right in and talked to the doctor telepathically. Unfortunately, this guy's life fell apart. His marriage fell apart. Well, maybe that was a good thing. I don't know, as someone who's not about marriage. He wrote a book called The Visitors from Lanus, Lanulos. It was published in 1971, if you want to look for that. After his writings, he would disappear, and then he kind of came back. He always felt like he was being watched, and that story just doesn't really end well. It just kind of ends with that guy's life falling apart. I don't know if nowadays, sometimes you hear on my podcast people that are contacted and it has a much better vibe to it or a much better thing going on. But that did not end well for him. And then here is where the Mothman story turns sad and takes minimal close. The Silver Bridge was a 2-lane bridge that connected Point Pleasant to Ohio. It was 2,235 feet in length, and it was made of an I-bar construction. There were 148 of these I-bars that were connected one to one. They were a flat I-bar that linked to one another through holes and through the eyes. Only 3 were built like this. After the tragedy of what happened, which I'm about to tell you, the others were adjusted and I believe were taken down. People would use this bridge because there was no tax on food in Ohio, so they would always be going over the bridge to get their groceries and stuff like that. So, 37 vehicles were stuck December 15th, 1967, on this bridge for the Christmas rush. There was one light in the town that controlled all the traffic, and the light was out. So all the cars were backed up bumper to bumper. This was a day where people were doing Christmas parties, Christmas shopping, all kinds of stuff. The electricity went off, and then the bridge collapsed. It took 2 to 3 minutes for the bridge to collapse. It tipped to one side and then rolled over and then got all twisted and broke up. Then the undertow pulled the people under. There were 31 cars that fell and 46 people died. They talk about how small Point Pleasant was, that there was like somewhere around 5,000 people, and how 46 people means everybody there knew somebody that died in this tragedy. It was 1/8 of a piece of rust that caused the bridge to stop and then to fall. Attention turned away from the Mothman and UFOs at this time, and there were only several people that claimed strange things, like they heard a sonic boom from under the bridge before it fell. This is almost like when 9/11, when you start to hear different stories of people that didn't, like something else happened. The I-bar excuse didn't work for everyone. And some believed it had there was a different motive here. Others, just a few, said they saw the Mothman on the bridge the day that happened. But after that bridge collapsed, all paranormal activity stopped. There were no more UFOs. The Mothman was not seen again. Everything quieted down. It was 13 months to the day of the first Mothman sighting that happened. So, are the two connected? Was the bridge falling having anything to do with Mothman? Who was Mothman? What was with all these UFOs? This is a strange one, and usually, as you know, I have some sort of a theory. And my theory for this one, I don't know if it was connected to the bridge. Many people said the Mothman through history, or the bird, the Thunderbird, was also connected with omens. He was there to give omens that the bridge was going to fall. I don't know. I feel like some sort of vortex opened from all either the chemical activity, or maybe something weird happened when we were doing our World War II thing, but some sort of a vortex got open and all these things came through, including the Mothman, and he just sort of made a home somewhere. Just sort of made a home at the power plant, because the one thing there's no other than him frightening people, no one has any reports of him hurting anyone. There's a report he may have taken a dog, but even that was never corroborated. There was no, other than the UFO, in Mr. Dernberg getting his life kind of scrambled. It was a lot of trauma, but it really was a peaceful thing. It was not what it is exposed to be in the movie Jeepers Creepers. Odd thing, the story does not end here. Suddenly, on my favorite email called Phantoms and Monsters, which I get every day, there are now Mothman sightings, probably in the last year or two, have picked up enormously, especially around Chicago. There are so many sightings now around Chicago, so we don't know what's coming. But there it is, folks. There's my podcast on the Mothman. UFOs, Men in Black, small town in West Virginia. One of the most fascinating paranormal stories out there. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you can give me 5 stars wherever you listen, that would be great. If you want a reading, you can go to karenrontowski.com or paranormalkaren.com. Please, if you enjoyed the podcast, forward it to a friend. Have a great day, and we will see you next week. People are always asking me, Karen, you are so knowledgeable about tarot, ghosts, and otherworldly spirits. How do you stay so organized and grounded here on Earth? And I have to tell them my secret weapon. It's black tourmaline. And Nita over at nitaapple.com. After years of complaining about all the text messages and emails back and forth, trying to schedule tarot readings and chasing after payments, Nita installed Acuity Scheduler on my website, and now I just get a little ding on my phone, and that tells me someone has made an appointment and the money is already in my account. I love that little ding, except every time it goes off, Courage runs to his food bowl. 5 minutes with Nita can save you 5 hours of bumbling around and trying to do things yourself. So if you spend 10 minutes with her, that'll save you like 72 hours or something like that. I don't know, I'm not good with math, but you know who is? Nita. That's who I would ask. Want to end all the emails back and forth and get paid up front when clients schedule time with you? Then hop on over to nitaapple.com/services and let Nita get you set up with a simple system that will make your life so much easier. Use coupon code BOO4U and get 20% off any products or services. She's got a lot of services and products that can save you time and money. That's BOO4U, all lowercase, BOO, the number 4, the letter U, and get 20% off. That's Nita Apple at nitaapple.com/services. nitaapple.com/services. nbsp.com/services and make your life easier today.